I'm Claire Cordeau from Simulate, and I'm just going to walk you through how you use the simulation. I would suggest that you use this webinar together with your user guide, and it should be fairly straightforward to use. If you have any problems, the first thing I'm going to show you is help, and if you need to contact anybody to help you use this, then just contact that email address there. So hopefully you've been able to open the simulation, which means downloading the viewer file and just opening this file that you have with it using the open button at the top here, if you're not viewing it online already. And what you're going to see on the screen is this image here. So what we're showing is patients who are in different states. So the way we're understanding patients with long-term conditions is that they are in a number of condition states, from low to very high, and over time they're going to progress through those states unless there's an intervention that stops that progression, and at some point they will probably die over that period of time. So what you can see are these transitions from low to medium to high to very high, and you have a number of options around that. Now, each time a patient is in a particular state, they have a probability of accessing a set of services, and that changes. Those sorts of services change when they change states. That's the principle of the model. Each of the services has a cost associated with it, so when you run the model through, you'll see the results in terms of the cost of your particular scenario. But I'll talk you through that as we start to run the simulation. On the right-hand side, down at the bottom here, you see you have a number of different settings, and that's what you're going to use to set up the simulation, to run it, and to view the results. So let's start with the population. I'm going to click on this button here, and you can select your own population from this list. So I'm going to randomly choose Barnet, and I'll click OK. So this tells me the current population of Barnet. Anybody who's from Barnet who thinks that number is wrong, that's absolutely fine. You can just change it. There we go. Very, very straightforward to do. So I'll click OK here. Now, it is not the whole population of Barnet that you're going to be modelling. It's the proportion of that population, which is your long-term conditions group. Now, we've set this at 0.55%, but you can, again, change that. The next screen that comes up is showing you your number of patients in the first year, so I'll just make that a whole number of patients. So that's the number of patients that you have in the year that you're going to start your model, and they will be in all different states. And then you'll have people who will probably join your model in year 2 and in year 3. Now, we don't know what number that is, but you will know that from your local data and your local assumptions. And again, you can change that here. But we've said that our incidence for year 2, which is the new patients joining, is 100, and the same again for year 3. I'm going to click OK here. Now, what this is showing me is the percentage of patients when the model starts up, so that 2,000 or so group of patients, what sort of state they're going to be in. So we've got 1% of that group who are in this very high state, 11% in the high state, 46% in the medium state, and 42% in the low state. So that's how the model is going to be populated to start with. And again, you can change that based on your local data. The next screen is showing us the incidence and which patients are in which state for that new group of patients. So the 100 that are going to join the model each year, what state they're going to be in. Now, we've just set this as the same, but you might expect that actually you're going to have far more people in the low state, for example. So let's make that up to 50, and let's say we'll take 8 away from this medium group. So all that always has to add up to 100%, but we can change the likelihood of patients joining and in which state they're going to join. Okay, so that's our population settings in here. So let's have a look at the data now. What this is showing us is what services people are likely to access depending on what states they're in. So if they're in the very high state, we can see, let's have a look at the non-elective acutes. 100% of that group are going to have a non-elective admission. 88% in the higher group, 79% in the medium group, 71% in the lower group. Again, we can have a look at service attendances. So if we have a look at that very high group, we can see the proportion of people who are likely to attend that service more than once. So if we're having a look at the acute non-electives, we've got 3 years here. We've actually set that the same as each year, but you can change that just by changing the number here. And we've got 22% in that very high group who are likely only to have one attendance, non-elective attendance per year, 11% who are likely to have 2, again 11% 3, etc. So you can set the frequency of visits to those services in the model as well, and that will vary for each state. The next button is the state transitions. Now, again, you will have better data that you can localize this with, but in this very high group, we said there are 80%. In that very high group, there are 20% that are probably likely to die during that year, and we've said that in each of those different states. But you can change that based on your local data, and you might also want to show the progression. So what proportion of low need people are going to move to medium need or high need or very high need over the year. So you can get much more sensitivity around that progression. And then we've got the costs. So for each of the services, we've got a variation in the costs that might be assigned to that service. Obviously, they're covering all sorts of different services that you might have. And again, these are percentages, and this is the amount. So we're going up in £50 increments, and these are the proportions. So in the acute day case, in these costs here, you've got around 14% that are going to cost £500. As you scroll down, you can see that actually there's a very small proportion here that's going to cost £3,100. So again, you can populate this with your costs. What this actually does in the model is to create a distribution so that every time a patient uses one of these services, then this distribution of costs will be used to calculate the likely cost overall. Okay, and then the final dialogue here is to set a tariff. So the purpose of this simulation is to work out what sort of tariff would fit for the groups of patients that you have, the services that they're likely to access, and how much they're going to cost. So we have randomly set a tariff for each of those groups, and again, in the usual way, you can change those. So that's our data. We have a couple of scenarios here. We can run this with our known population and our unknown population. What that means is if this is a population that's known to your integrated care team, you will have different proportions of likelihood of access of service, likelihood or frequency of access of service, and you can change that for that set of people. And this is your unknown population. Those are the group that are not known to your community services team, but you're able to track the services that they use. And in this way, you're able to model the impact of perhaps having more patients in that known group, more patients in that, as opposed to in that unknown group. And you can look at the impact of a change on the cost of your services and the likely tariff you're going to need to apply. We've taken this data from the early implementer sites, so there's something for you to play around with if you're not part of those sites and you want to try out their assumptions. but you can also populate it with your own data. So we're going to run this with the known population for now. Okay, so we've set up the simulation for our system now, and what we're going to do is to run the scenario. So this is the big run button here. If you click on this, it gives you a little dialogue that says, do you want to run an individual run or a trial? Now, what a trial is multiple runs of the same scenario. And what the model will do is sample from the different distributions in that model to create a range of results, and then we'll show you the mean of that range. It is a more robust way of testing your scenario. So whilst I'm going to run an individual run now so we can have a look at it, when you've played about with this a bit and you want to get the really robust results before taking your changes to a business case, for example, we would strongly suggest that you run a trial. So I'm going to click OK on this, and you can see here the simulation is running, please wait. Now I've got this set to run at full speed, which makes it a bit faster, but if I just push that bar back a bit, it runs a little bit slower, and you can see the numbers starting to appear. So we're running with this with a known population. We've got community contacts in here, but I'll just push it back to the full run. And what we can see here is the clock, and this is just counting the weeks. So we're now, that's it, the second year's just run through, and we're just waiting for year 3 to run. This always runs for 3 years. There we go. And it's just preparing the results, so you need to wait until this little sign has stopped, where it says simulation running, please wait, and then this little dialog pops up saying run complete. So you click OK on that. So now we can have a look at our results. And if we have a look at the results summary, you can see overall how many patients were in each state in each year, and the total numbers and the numbers by those different need states. That's low need, medium need, high, very high. You can define what those states mean for you. People do that differently depending on the locality. This is telling you the total cost, and this is telling you the cost by year. This is the average cost per patient, and again the average cost by year. And this is the cost frequency chart, so you can see that most patients are costing around £8,000. So that's your high-level results. You can drill down now to compare that with your tariff. So what we've got here is, again, the total cost for each state, and then what that means in year 1, year 2, and year 3. The average patient cost for the 3 years, and the average patient cost in year 1, year 2, and year 3, and then the tariff that you set. So in actual fact, the cost for these particular patients is way outstripping the tariff that you've set. So one of the things you'll want to compare is what your revenue is likely to be for those individual patients. So that's all those patients in each state multiplied up by their tariff, compared with what they're actually going to be costing. And here's your number of patients in each group and how that changes year on year. And again, if you want to have a look at the cost frequency in each of the states, you have the graphs here. And then if you want to drill down further into the results and look at each of the areas of service and see how much they're costing for each group in each year, you can see that as well. So you can, that gives you some sort of comparison, and you can see the social care costs as well as mental health, community care, and acute. So the idea is that you test out your different scenarios for what you think might happen. You try and understand how your patients are using services, what difference that might make over time as the population changes, and you compare those results with your tariff in order to be able to understand and get some good evidence for the changes that you want to make. I hope that explains how the simulation works. Again, please do use this with the user guide. Please do contact us if you have any queries at all. We'd love to hear from you. We think this simulation will probably change as more and more people use it in anger. So don't be afraid to give us your feedback and things that you'd like to see in it to make it really useful to you. Thank you very much for listening. Good luck, and hope to hear from you. Bye.